This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
You are listening to In a City Like Yours, a semi-monthly podcast featuring interesting people with interesting life stories. This podcast may contain language and/or subject matter not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm your host, Michael G. Moore. Please visit our website at inacitylikeyours.com. That's INACITYLIKEYOURS.com for links to our social media, all popular podcast platforms, and links of interest pertaining to all episodes. On this episode, I welcome Joe to the show. Joe is a writer, director, producer, and special effects artist working in the horror film industry. He is best known for his cult classic film, Terror Toons, and its sequels. Join us as Joe discusses his early film career and his horror film exploits with his partner of over 20 years, Stephen. Here is Joe's story.
My name is Joe Castro, and I am a director and a producer, and I create special effects and a visual effects supervisor for motion pictures out in Hollywood, California. And I've been doing this for quite some time now. You know, I decided to begin a career in this field when I was 7 years old. And most people at 7 don't know exactly what they want to do. But my father was one of my biggest supporters growing up. And he knew at the age of 7 that I was very interested in dragons and dinosaurs. And I wasn't really big in sports. But I was interested in the arts, and he was always there to encourage me to do what I loved. And one weekend in the middle of summer in 1977, my father was babysitting me because my mother was away on a trip with her girlfriends, her work friends. He said, "Here, son, sit down and watch this on TV. You're gonna love it. I'm gonna go outside. I'm gonna do doing some work out on the ranch. I grew up on a big goat ranch, 55 acres in South Texas near San Antonio." Sure enough, my dad knew exactly what I would like. It was Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. And he knew that I liked dinosaurs and I liked dragons. So Godzilla was like just a natural course to take an interest in as far as film and television. And, you know, that movie, I remember watching that movie. And when that movie was over, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that I wanted to make special effects and creatures. I wanted to make motion pictures. You know, I've been chasing that dream ever since. I tried to gather information as best I could, you know, in 1977 to become a special effects artist and a director in South Texas. And how I did that was, you know, I started reading magazines that had interviews with other special effects artists in them and other directors. And there was a man, his name is Forrest J. Ackerman. Most people don't know this, but Forrest J. Ackerman is the very first sci-fi horror fan ever. That's because when Forrest was a young man, he would sneak onto the Universal backlot here in Hollywood, California at Universal Studios, and he went onto the movie set of like the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. Now, Forrest passed away in the early 2000s, but Forrest was able to meet Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and all these people. Forrest actually had a little bottle of blood that they used in the movie Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And I remember he always had it with him. He didn't have it with him, but he had it with him to the day he died in his house. And it's one of his prized possessions. He also owned the ring that Bela Lugosi wore on his hand that he would hypnotize people with. And when he'd say, "Look into my eyes," and he'd put his hand out, that Dracula ring. And he wore that all the time religiously. But either way, Forrest G. Ackerman, the very first sci-fi horror fan ever, started a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland. And when I was 7 years old, I could go to the local supermarket where they had a big giant magazine stand, magazine rack. They don't have those anymore today in grocery stores, but they had them back then, and I could buy Famous Monsters of Filmland. And Forrest would interview famous directors like Joe Dante and John Landis and Rick Baker, the special effects artist, and Toby Hooper, who directed the original Poltergeist and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And in these articles, the directors and the special effects artists that made these movies would give detailed descriptions about how they went about making this movie magic. And, I just sucked all that up like a sponge, By the time I was 12, I had graduated to other magazines that I found that were highly informative. Fangoria magazine, which is still in publication today, also did the same. They would interview directors and special effects artists. Even though their format has changed today, it's not so much the same. I wish they would go back to their original format. But they would interview special effects artists, and these special effects artists would give really detailed descriptions about how they would go about making some of these creatures and these characters and some of these special effects in movies. So they were a really good example of where to go and what to look for and how to go about creating your own special effects for your own movies. So when I was 12 years old, I was highly investing most of my time studying Fangoria, Famous Monsters of Filmland. There were a couple of other magazines, but one of them in particular, on my 12th birthday, I found, and I know this very specifically because my cousin Eddie Perez, he was 22 years older than me at the time. For my 12th birthday, he took me to a sci-fi horror magazine collectible store in San Antonio, Texas. And he said, whatever you want, pick out whatever you want, and I'll buy it for you for your birthday. And I found this magazine. It was called Cinemagic. And it was a very small publication. It wasn't a big, thick magazine. And it was put together by other special effects artists and directors that were independent. They were trying to learn how to make their own movies. And that magazine changed my entire world. Because in this one magazine, I could literally correspond with other directors and special effects artists all over the country, all over the world, anybody who read it, and wrote in articles and had a subscription to the magazine. And we would all talk kind of like in a forum. It was kind of like Facebook, but in a magazine print. If you got a subscription to the magazine, you were allowed to have a little 5-line paragraph in the back of the magazine where you could say whatever you wanted. You could put your name, your phone number, what you were interested in, where someone could contact you. And so that's what I did. I put my name and my phone number, and I said, hi, my name is Joe Castro. Back then I was Joey Castro. And I said, if you live in this South Texas area, or you're interested in talking about special effects, this is my phone number. Please call me. And sure enough, I corresponded and made friends with other people that wanted to do the same thing that I did. And but that particular issue that I bought, it was issue number 6. It taught me how to make a rubber mask. It had step-by-step instructions on how to create the foundation of all special effects when it comes to making like creatures or life casts of people or anything in that area. So that one magazine totally changed my world. And if you Google it online today, you can still find that issue. It's Cinemagic, which is spelled C-I-N-E, Magic, and it's issue number 6. And on the cover, it has a man who looks like he's being created by an alien, and the alien is wearing a rubber mask, and it says, bring your alien to life on the cover. And if you open up the magazine, or if you look for the pages of that issue online, It'll give you those step-by-step instructions on how to create your own full head custom rubber mask from scratch. I ran with it, and I was very experimental. I tried to do all kinds of things using these techniques. And at the same year, my mother and my father bought me a camcorder, VHS camcorder camera, the first retail sold video camera to the home consumer market. Came out that year. It was 1982. I was 12 years old. I got that for Christmas, I believe. My mother said, here you go. Here's your education. Here's your college education right here. Because at the time, it cost $2,200 for that camera. And that was a lot of money for my parents, who were a goat ranch farmer and a school teacher. And so they knew that's what I really wanted to do with my career and my life. So they knew that it was going to be very beneficial to me. And I started making home movies, and I started creating the special effects that I would use in my movies. So I would write films basically centered around special effects that I wanted to create. And I would have all my friends from school come over on the weekends, play actors in my films, and sometimes I would make a slasher film, sometimes I would make a zombie film, sometimes I would make a creature movie. You know, I made some really close friends at school that were also very interested in making films as well. And one of them in particular lived about a mile from my house. His name was Kevin Williams. And Kevin is still my best friend today, one of my best friends. And we're still very close. So Kevin and I literally spent, I believe it was from our 7th grade summer all the way to like our sophomore year in high school, just making home movies, horror movies, watching horror movies, studying special effects, making films. Kevin went off on a different path and chose a different career, but he still has an interest in making horror films. And I'm pretty sure one of these days he's going to come out to LA and we're going to make a movie together soon. But and I went off on another direction, and I continued studying my career in filmmaking, and I moved to Los Angeles, California in 1989, and started to meet people in the industry. And I had actually had a small brush with some of these people in 1985 before I moved out to LA, when I won an international special effects makeup contest through the same magazine that Forrest G. Ackerman put out. Well, actually, it was like a sister magazine of it, but it was by the same editor, Forrest G. Ackerman. This one was called Monsterland, and Monsterland magazine had a contest where you were going to, they invited everybody to make a special effects creation and send it into the magazine, and the best one was going to win a trip to Hollywood. One of the few requirements was that you had to be under the age of 18, so everybody was on the same competing level. Joe Dante, who is the director of Gremlins, and Joe Dante directed The Howling and Explorers, and he's done a lot of amazing films. He was one of the judges, and John Carl Buechler, who just passed away last year. John Carl Buechler was a special effects artist and a director of the Friday 13th Part 7 from the Paramount franchise, and he also directed one of my favorite films, Troll. He was one of the judges as well. And so Joe Dante and John Carl Buechler picked my special effects entry as the winner of the contest. And I was flown out to Los Angeles, where I got to meet Joe Dante and John Carl Buechler and many other people in the industry. And I also got to meet Brinke Stevens, who was at the time just starting her career in acting. And she was later on going to become one of my best friends in the industry, and she still is my best friend today. She only lives about 1.5 miles from my house here in Hollywood, and I got to meet her, and I got to meet a lot of people. So when I came out here in '89, I already had a little connection to Hollywood, and I was able to naturally move into the field of working with other effects artists and working on movies. And I eventually ended up making my first feature film with a friend of mine that I met. His name is Stephen Gaynor. And Steve Gaynor is now a very well-known, successful director of photography. Steve and I produced a movie together titled Ceremony. And I later on retitled it Ceremony, The Resurrection of Evil. And we shot this movie in a friend of mine's house in here in Hollywood, California, just below the Griffith Observatory in Griffith Park. And we shot this movie over a period of 14 days with Panavision camera and lenses on 35 millimeter film, which is a very different way of making a movie than most young people are making them today. Back then in 1993, you had to shoot a movie on film, and the movie, the film had to be developed and processed and transferred to analog video, which was Beta SP at the time, in order for you to edit it, unless you were cutting the negative, which was a very expensive process. So making a film back then was a real big feat and a real big accomplishment if you could get it done. And we were able to get it done and get it into the video stores. And that was my very first feature film, Ceremony. And just all the stars aligned. And Forrest J. Ackerman, the editor of the very first horror sci-fi magazine ever, and the man who introduced me to Hollywood, became the star of my very first feature film. Forrest Ackerman was the named talent in our movie Ceremony, and I'm so honored and grateful to have had him in my life, even though he, like I said, he did pass away in the early 2000s. You know, it was a lot of trial and error after that. You make your first movie, you get rejected, you have some small success, you move on to the next one. My career went on to, I moved back home to Texas for a small stint where my father had passed away and in a horrible accident. I decided to make my second movie in my hometown in Helotes, Texas, on my father's goat ranch. And the movie was titled Legend of the Chupacabra. And it was the very first ever Chupacabra movie ever made. Since then, many people have made movies about the Chupacabra, but mine was the first, and we shot it in 1997. And the year my father passed away, right after he passed away, on the goat ranch in memorandum of him, I dedicated the movie to him. And it was later released by Troma Entertainment. This is on the set of this film is where I met my partner of 21 years, Steven Escobar. I've been with Steve for 21 years now, and we have made 12 feature films together. I met Steven on while editing the movie Legend of the Chupacabra. I had some trouble putting it together, and Steven was an editor and also a producer, and he said, "Here, let me help you finish this film and get it ready for distribution." And that's where we began our professional relationship together. And later on, we realized that we were chasing the same dream together, and he has become my life partner now for 21 years. And I'm so grateful and so honored to have him in my life. And we keep chasing that dream together, and it's been an amazing journey so far. And so Steven and I naturally decided that we would move back out to Los Angeles together to pursue our career in filmmaking. We came out here in the year 2000. You know, Steve didn't know anybody. I knew some people already. So they threw a whole bunch of money my way, and I began working again, doing what I was doing. And meanwhile, we were trying to find Steve a job doing what he had skills at, which was editing and producing. Steve finally got a job on the television show, I believe it was called Blind Date. It had several seasons, and Steve became a very successful editor, and he actually has an Emmy. He has an Emmy for outstanding editing in reality television programming, and we continued making movies together. And, you know, it was about that time, right after we first moved out here, that I had an amazing opportunity to make a movie with Steven, and we decided to bring another friend of ours from Texas out to Los Angeles to shoot it, because we decided to shoot a movie in 3 days. The entire movie was going to be shot in 3 days, and we had a budget of $2,500. That's $2,500 to shoot an entire movie. And we were going to shoot the entire thing on video. We weren't going to shoot it on film. And we were going to shoot it at a friend of mine's house who was going to put up the $2,500 to make the film. All the stars aligned, and we made this crazy cult hit movie. It's titled Terror Toons, and that's spelled terror, Toons, tunes, like cartoons. And it's a movie about killer cartoons. It's basically a movie about some evil cartoons that were made by the devil to wreak havoc all over the world. We wrote the script within a matter of a couple of weeks, and we shot the entire movie in 3 days over Easter weekend. It was a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday in 2001, I believe. It was a life-changing event, because what happened was, after we were done shooting this film, Steve and I used, technology that is now very common to young people. But at the time, After Effects was not commonly used by most people. This was, like I said, in 2001. Steve taught himself how to use After Effects, and we made the first kind of like CGI shot on video cult movie, very similar to what TV shows are being produced with today, like, let's say Adult Swim and on the internet. But 20 years ago, no one was doing it. And so we had this very unique film that was shot we brought it in actually at $2,300. We actually were $200 under budget. Every Blockbuster in America picked up the movie. And that is a really big deal, because our $2,300 movie was sitting right on the video shelf next to Pirates of the Caribbean. That's a major accomplishment. We had 8 copies in every Blockbuster in America, 8 copies in every Hollywood Video. At the time, Netflix was just beginning. I think they picked up something like 2,200 copies right off the bat. I believe we moved like 50,000 units of the film in the first 2 weeks alone. And that was an amazing accomplishment. And since then, we've made 4 sequels to the film, because it became an overnight cult phenomenon. There was just nothing like it out in the market. And so that's what I think made it so attractive. Everybody wanted something new and something different. And even though it was shot very inexpensively, and it's has a very, B movie, low budget look to it, it still is extremely entertaining. You can have a very expensive movie and it can be a real bore, but you can have a real cheesy movie and it can be completely entertaining. And that's what we made, a very entertaining, cheesy movie. It has its own fan following. That's why we keep making them, because people still want to see them. And the 2 characters in the film are very popular characters, Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin. Those are some crazy characters that I came up with the concept of, and I had a good friend of mine who's also a special effects artist create the characters, sculpt and create them based on my design. Like I say, we shot this movie in 3 days, and I don't think I could ever do that again in 3 days. But I don't know, stranger things have happened. That was almost 20 years ago. I don't know if I can move as fast as I did then, but I guess if someone asked me to do it, I would definitely give it a good try. So, and then moving on, right after that movie was a big success, I had the opportunity to meet a man that had deeply inspired me. It was the man that created the very first slasher movie ever. And how do I know this? How do I know that he created the very first slasher movie ever? Because in 1963, a man named Herschel Gordon Lewis directed a movie titled Blood Feast. And I'm going to put this out there. Tell me if this storyline sounds familiar to anyone. A deranged killer stalks innocent victims one by one, killing each one graphically on screen in a horrific death, only to be killed by the hands of the hero or the heroine of the movie in an even more horrific death at the end of the film, in the climax. That is the storyline of every slasher movie ever made. And Herschel made that storyline in 1963 with his very first slasher movie ever, Blood Feast. So if you're a big horror fan and you like slasher movies and you've never seen Blood Feast, you have to see it. Your education into the world of horror is incomplete. So in 2001, after I finished Terror Tunes and it became a hit, I was asked to create the special effects for Blood Feast 2. Herschel was going to make the sequel to his 1963 smash hit in 2001, and they needed a special effects artist, and I was asked to do it. So here we are, 1963, 2001, what is that? Something like, how many years is that later? Like 37 years or something like that. Many, many years later, over 3 decades later, he's decided he wanted to make the sequel to it. I came out to New Orleans where they were shooting it, just outside of New Orleans, and I got to meet Herschel Gordon Lewis, this man who shot, wrote, directed, edited, created all the sound, and he created all the special effects for the very first slasher movie ever. I got to meet this man, and this man changed my life. He was an amazing, talented man, and a very kind man, and a very professional man. He became my good friend, and I'd already lost my father in 1997, and Herschel became very instrumental in showing me a prime example of how a man should behave, carry himself, and be. Before Herschel died about 3 years ago, and before Herschel died, I made a promise to him that I would always treat others with the same kindness and respect he always showed me, and that I would honor his name and always speak about him in a positive light. And he should be honored for all that he has given the genre of horror and slasher movies forever. He should always be remembered as the very first slasher director. You know, I told Herschel that I would honor his name and I would honor his films, and you know, I made him happy. He told me, "This makes me very happy, Joe." At the time, I didn't know he was sick when I told him this, and he died shortly thereafter, almost a month later. But before he died, my partner Steven and I were able to interview him on camera, an interview that we have not yet released. And he told me the blood formula for his original 1963 slasher movie. He told me that, and so I'm basically the caretaker of the blood formula from that first film, and I still use it. I still use the blood formula sometimes on movie sets. It has its purpose and it has its place in the film world today for me, and I still like to use it. And when I bring it on set, I let everybody know, this is Herschel Gordon Lewis Blood Feast Blood right here. You know, I kind of bless the set with it, and I use it. It makes me proud to know that I can share Herschel's magic still today with everybody in the world. But so Herschel went on to make we worked on Blood Feast 2 together, and that became a big cult hit as well. A very graphic film, a lot of gore, a lot of special effects, ripping people's guts out. There's an amazing scene where a woman has all of her skin peeled off of her head, like you would peel an orange, basically. And then the top of her head is cut off with a turkey carver. Her skull cap is removed, and her brains are pulled out of her head. I made a mechanical puppet of the actress and of her skin and her face and her jaw and her eyes so it would move, because Herschel wanted it to be very graphic. And I remember when we were shooting the scene, I put the blood and the slime and the gore, you know, underneath the skin, so when the skin was peeled away, you would see all the bloody, gory bits and pieces. And on the first take, when it happened, Herschel said, "Cut. That's not gory enough." And I said, "What do you mean? It's covered in blood. It's covered in slime. What more do you?" He goes, "It's just not gory enough, Joe." I said, "Make it gorier." Or he said, "Make it gorier." So I did my best. And we did a couple more takes, and he said, "No, that's just not gory enough." He said, "Come over here." So I went with Herschel, and we took a bucket, and we went over to the craft service table where all the food from lunch was sitting. And he said, "Put some of that in there." And he pointed to some mashed potatoes that we had from lunch. He said, "Now put some of that over there and there." And he pointed at some chicken parts that were left over off some chicken bones. And he said, "Now put some of that in there." And he put some salad dressing in it. And he said, "Now mix that all up." He goes, "That looks pretty good. Now bring that and put some blood on that and put it on the head. That'll make it gross." And sure enough, it did. So Herschel taught me how to make my gore even gorier and more gross. And he was just a very talented, entertaining man. And later on, we shot a movie together. It's called Terror Toons 3. It was the third Terror Toons in the franchise. He was the star of that film. I went to Florida to shoot his parts with my partner, Steven Escobar. And that movie was released 3 years ago. And it's available now on Vimeo. If you have Vimeo, you can see Herschel Gordon Lewis in Terror Toons 3. In fact, you can get all three of the Terror Toons that are released now on Vimeo. And 1 and 2 are available on Amazon Prime. And so, Herschel and I had a very professional and friendly relationship for many years, and he still inspires me to this day, even though he's passed on. So further on, I have been working in special effects for quite some time now, and I worked with many talented directors. I'd like to mention I worked with Thomas Churchill recently on several films. The most important one we worked on together was a movie titled Xenophobia. Now, a few years ago, if you would have Googled the word xenophobia for the definition, it would have said the fear of aliens or the fear of foreigners or anything unknown. Of course, today, in today's political climate, it means the fear of illegal aliens or the fear of people who are foreign to our country. But our film, Xenophobia, centers around the fear of aliens, like extraterrestrial aliens. It's a science fiction film with a little bit of horror element in it. And if you like practical special effects and you like Star Wars and you like alien horror movies from the 80s, you'll love this film because all the aliens in the film are built practically. And once again, like Terror Toons, which was the first of its kind, Xenophobia is the first of its kind as well. It is the first ever alien abduction anthology movie. And basically, it centers around these 5 strangers. They come together in a support group, in an alien abduction support group, to talk about their experiences being abducted, being possessed by aliens, basically having a close encounter with aliens. And so we get to see their experiences, and we get to see these different races of aliens that they've encountered. And so Thomas Churchill and my partner, Steven Escobar, and myself co-wrote, co-directed, and co-produced this film. And it's out right now at every Walmart in America. You can also get it on Amazon DVD and Amazon Instant Video and all the streaming platforms that are available to the public. It's everywhere right now. So if you get a chance to check that out, it's a great creepy film for the holiday haunting holiday season. I worked on several films with Thomas. One of them in particular that won't be out till next year, and I can't give away too many details about it because it is hush-hush. I can't even give the title of it out. But I will say that Thomas gave me the opportunity to build the largest creature I've ever built in my entire life as far as special effects are concerned. When he approached me to make this creature, I can't give any way details about what it is, but I can tell you this. When he approached me to make the creature, he said, I want the creature to be able to bite someone in half with one bite. Kind of like Jaws is what he said. Like the way the Jaws shark was able to bite someone in half. So it has to be that big. And I was like, wow, awesome. We can do this. So like I said, it's the biggest creature I've made, and it's all practical. And it's going to be coming out in 2020. I believe it comes out February of 2020. So be on the lookout for a giant creature film directed by Thomas Churchill and special effects by me, Joe Castro. So, I worked with David Sterling. David Sterling gave me an opportunity to direct several movies that are really cool cult films. Maniacal, Butchered, Evil Unleashed, Blood Sisters. Recently, I worked with Dave Sterling on The Curse of La Llorona, and my favorite title, one of my favorite all-time titles. The movie's not out yet, but it should be coming out soon. It's called Vampire Campfire, my favorite title of any film I've ever worked on. And David hired me to do the special effects for that film. So be on the lookout for Dave Sterling's new movies. We're also working on a film this weekend we're shooting. It's called The Occultist 2. And I believe it's being directed by Tom Knuth, and I'm providing all the gore and special effects for the movie as well. And then I also want to talk about Brinke Stevens a little bit. Brinke Stevens, I mentioned earlier. Brinke Stevens is a scream queen and a very talented writer and now director. She is directing her own feature films now. And she's been in over 200 movies. So I think that pretty much qualifies her to produce and direct and write her own films. Steven and I hired Brinke to write, produce, direct, and star in her very first film that she was able to accomplish all those, wear all those hats in. And it was a movie titled Personal Demons. She wrote it herself, and she directed it, and produced it. And she cast the film, and she stars in the film. The movie should be coming out soon, like within the next year, I hope. But it is complete already. It's a really, really amazing piece of work. And I'm just so proud to know Brink. I'm so proud to work with her. Brink's also in Xenophobia. And if you don't know who Brink Stevens is, Google her, Brink Stevens. Brink is spelled Brinke, Stevens with a V. She's, like I said, been in over 200 movies, and she has just this amazing body of work. And she's an amazing human being to know as well. You can catch her at most of the horror cons. So, Brink has been a big influence in my life. And, since meeting her and working with all these other professional people, have really had the ability to chase my dream. And, I made a promise to my father when I was 18 years old, before I left the house to move out to Los Angeles. He looked at me and said, "Son, I want you to promise me that you will never stop chasing your dreams." He knew that was the only thing that was going to make me happy. And so I made a promise to him. I remember it was in 1988. I remember specifically, we were on the front porch, and he told me that in kind of like almost in secrecy and privacy, because he knew that my family had other ideas for my career, but he himself knew that I would only be happy if I continued to always chase my dream. So I kept that promise to my father, and my partner, Steven Escobar, and I still chase this dream of making movies, making the world a much happier, fun place to be, one film at a time. I invite anybody that's interested in working on films or working with me or working with my partner, Steven, to reach out to me on Facebook. You can reach me at facebook.com/joe.castro, or you can send me a message on Instagram. My Instagram account is Joe_Castro_director. Reach out and say hello, and let's make some movies. One last thing I'll leave everybody with is Halloween is always a very big, influential part of my year. On Halloween, I like to test out, or just do everything I've wanted to try throughout the year. I do it on myself on Halloween, as far as special effects makeup is concerned. It's a big deal. It's a big ordeal. I personally like to get dressed up in the daytime and go out in broad daylight where everybody can really see the details of my costume. And I wear it into the night. So it has to be something that really sticks to me all day long. It's very elaborate. It's always something very crazy, very elaborate, very over the top. And it's very scandalous. And if you Google Joe Castro Halloween, you will see some of my Halloween costumes. And so this year, I'm going to try and outdo myself from last year, of course. And why bother if you're not going to outdo yourself? And so I have a lot on my plate right now, but I'm hoping to take the time. I need a few days to prepare the costume and put it together. And come over and say hello to me on my Facebook page and my Instagram account. I'll post some pictures of my Halloween costume this year. But for now, all I have to say is if you're interested in a career in special effects or filmmaking, to always chase your dreams and never give up, and always treat others with the way that you wish to be treated, with kindness and respect, and you will go far.